Bom dia, Victor.
Bom dia, Saninha, tudo bom?
Bem, graças a Deus. E você, tudo bom?
Tudo bem, graças a Deus.
Bom,
Você está me escutando bem?
muito bem. Alto e clear. Alto e claro.
Tudo bem. Não sei porque o chat do YouTube para mim não está funcionando. Deixa eu ver.
Quer que eu testo? Deixa eu ver.
Ah, não, agora tá. Era só trocar de conta. Muito bem.
Ah, beleza, então.
Muito bem, acho que então eu vou começar falando dos nossos announcements. Well, so welcome everybody. Glad to see you all here today. I want to start by showing us a little bit of our announcements for today. We have our mini workshop, The Right to Live, Abortion Prevention, coming up here next weekend on March 7th from 3 to 5 p.m. That's a Sunday, and it'll be through Zoom, and we'll have some spiritist reflections around the theme, the right to live, most specifically on abortion and the spiritual healing around it. So come and join us. Will be a more informal way of doing this workshop as we've done in previous years, because we're all online. So it'll be via Zoom, and we'll have a chance for us to interact, to talk, and it should be really fun. So please join us. We also have we're starting a new course for our doctrinal department for people that would like to start learning how to do talks and also how to learn more about spiritism. So we'll be starting this course on the 17th of March. It is in Portuguese, so please contact us if you have any questions about that. Then we also have our book club on March 20th. The book is Entre a Terra e o Céu. This book is in Portuguese, but if there are any English speakers that would like to participate, please let us know, and we can arrange something for you. And the last but not least is our Monday meeting tomorrow. We usually have a Monday meeting, a public meeting, on Mondays, sorry, at 7 p.m. But tomorrow we won't be having our public meeting, but instead we'll be having our studies of the gospel according to Spiritism. And so tomorrow this will start at 7 and not at 8 in the same place when our public meeting is. So those are all my announcements for today, and I just want to start with a little text here from our daily bread. And it is text number 99 with ardent love. When Peter says, above all, love each other deeply. Emmanuel says that it is not enough to proclaim virtue in favor of the establishment of the divine kingdom among mankind. Problem extensively debated equals solution much delayed. Let us individually listen to the apostolic warning and swell with ardent charity one for all. To speak well, to teach with certainty, and to believe sincerely are the primary phases of the service. It is crucial to work to create and to feel with the Christ. Fraternity, simply suggested to others, builds brilliant facades that experience can consume in 1 minute. It is imperative to achieve the substance, the essence. Let us be understanding with those who are ignorant, vigilant, in relation to those who have gone astray in evil and in the shadows, patient toward those who are ill, serene toward the irritated, and above all, let us manifest goodwill toward all those who the Master entrusted to us for the daily teachings. Prompt reasoning, being well prepared to act with agility on earth, can constitute a valuable patrimony. On the other hand, if the heart is lacking in feeling for the problems, in conducting and resolving them for the common good, he will be susceptible to being easily converted into a calculator. Let us not be detained in theoretic compassion. Let us seek fraternal love, spontaneous, ardent, and pure. Heavenly charity not only scatters benefits, it also radiates the divine light. So join me in a prayer right now. Letting these words from Emmanuel, these words of kindness, these words of love, these words of compassion, swim within our own waters, within our own heart, connecting our feelings and our thoughts with our divine, with our Father, with Christ, with our guardian angels. So many out there watching out for us, loving us, wanting us to be loving and to be kind. Dear Lord, we ask that please today you help us and you guide us when we talk a little bit more about our feelings, when we talk about the importance of feelings. And if it's allowed, that the words can touch our hearts and inspire us to feel with Christ, like Emmanuel just told us. So be it. Well, welcome everybody again. And just fix something up here. Very well. So today we'll be talking about feelings again, one more time, and we will have more than just talking about feelings twice. I just want to welcome our participants today. Gislaine, very good to see you here. Sonia, thank you again for being here with us. And again, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please, you can just unmute yourself and tell us something in Zoom. You can I'll put something on our chat or also on YouTube. We're monitoring it here, so please let us know comments or questions, and we'll address them as we go. So it is something that has been in my mind, and I've been working in the past months or so on feelings, on the importance of feelings, and it is such an important topic to myself that this won't be one talk. We've already had one a couple of weekends ago, so I invite you all to go on YouTube on our channel and find that talk if you want. This now is part 2, talking about the importance of feelings, and we'll focus on the reflection. Have I been attentive or dismissive towards my feelings? And there's so much material about feelings on the Spiritist doctrine that is a very powerful indication of how important feelings are. Emmanuel talks a lot. There's a number of texts in many books that he brings about the importance of feelings. So just the idea and the fact that we have so much material, it's a good indication to us that yes, we should be paying attention to them, because feelings are very, very important. And again, I will develop this into part 3, into part 4, maybe even 5. Today we'll be bringing texts from, let's go to the next slide here. So today I'll be bringing, again, texts about, from the Spiritist doctrine, such as Vine of Light, Thought and Life, collections from beyond, psychophonics, instructions, the gospel. And again, this talk is all based on a talk delivered by Artur Valadares entitled Feeling. A lot of my words are his, and because it is a talk that touched me quite a bit, so I'd like to be able to give it again. And so today we'll be again bringing more of what the Spiritist doctrine talks about feelings. On the next part, so part 3, in a few weekends, I'll be bringing more about the science, about how the data, how the research shows that feelings are indeed very important, and then be able to bring the science together with Spiritism and show how, yet again, science is proving that Spiritism is indeed correct. So as a start, when the reflections that we bring today around feelings is, have I been attentive to my feelings? Have I given my feelings space or time for me to feel, for me to reflect? Or have I been dismissive towards my feelings? I don't think they're important, so I just shut them down, or I just ignore them, if you will. And the next reflection is, so what? Right? If I've been attentive or if I've been dismissive, what's the point? Why should I even care about my feelings? And so these are the 3 reflections that we bring to you today. And we'll start with the same slide that I started our last talk, just so we're all on the same page. It's a very powerful passage from Emmanuel. He brings this to us on the book Vine of Light, chapter 29, on a text entitled, Let's Care for the Heart. And he brings us a definition about feeling and how important it is. I'm just writing something here on YouTube. And, so he says, in this text. He starts this text by saying, it is urgent to recognize that in the feeling lies the control of life. So Emmanuel is telling us here that the control of our lives, they lie within our feelings. Our feelings is what control our lives. And he's telling us that it is urgent for us to recognize this, in a way to say that, the time has come that we start paying attention to our feelings and realize that our feelings, they drive a lot of our lives. So hopefully throughout today, we'll take on this invitation from Emmanuel and start talking about more feelings and how they impact our lives. And something that he also said was that the feeling is the creature's sanctuary. Without light inside, it is impossible to reflect the luminous peace that flows continuously from above. So he's telling us that, right, our feelings is this sanctuary that we hold within. And only through enlightened feelings within our hearts can we actually not only absorb the peace and light that the divine brings to us, but we'll also be able to portray that to the outside. You can think of it as a beacon of light that we have within ourselves. And on a different text, when Emmanuel, in a text called Collections from Beyond, he tells us that in spiritist circles, much has been said about reasoned faith, but rarely about enlightened reason. And this is just an invitation for reflection here regarding faith. And I won't spend too much time here, but it's just for us to reflect. A lot of times we bring the concept of reasoned faith. And this is one of the strong teachings from Spiritism, that our faith no longer has to be blind, but we can reason it out. We can bring our thought, we can bring our intellect and make sense of that faith. And so we're joining not only that believing, that feeling of faith, but we're also being able to reason it out within our minds and not having to shut our minds down to have faith. But no, they can both combine and create this stronger faith, that we call it reasoned faith. But Emmanuel is calling us here that a lot of times we spend talking about the reasoned faith, and we spend a lot of time on the thought, on the intellect. And his reminder here is to talk about enlightened reason. So the reason by itself would be our thoughts, our logic behind something, our reflections. But how do we make those enlightened? It is by enlightening our feelings that we're able to enlighten our reason. Otherwise, if we stay too much in the intellectualism, in the thought, our emotional maturity can be quite lacking. And that will influence basically our reason. So the invitation here from Emmanuel is to not only think about reasoned faith, but about enlightened reason. How are we enlightening our reason so we can properly and more powerfully have this reasoned faith? And today, I apologize for the amount of text that I'll have today, but we will be going through an entire text from a book called Psychophonic Instructions from Chico Xavier. And this text is brought to us by Aulus. Aulus is, for those of you who read the book from André Luiz called In the Dominions of Mediumship, Aulus is the mentor that takes André Luiz and Hilario around and teach them and show them things about mediumship. So his name is Aulus, and Aulus is the one who brings this message to us on this book. And we'll go through the entire text and we'll bring some reflections. So he starts with saying, friends, in our relationships with the Lord, with our fellow man, with life and with nature, it is important to remember that our own soul produces the subtle models that guide our daily activities. So it's amazing how Emmanuel and Alos, these superior spirits, are in line or in sync. If you remember the first slide, Emmanuel told us that it is within our feelings that the control of our life lies. Well, Alos again is telling us here that our own soul produces the subtle models that guide our daily activities. So he's telling us that our feelings is what guide our daily activities, our daily actions. So again, you can see how in sync they are, especially when talking about feelings. Good morning, Carol. Great to see you here today. And then he goes on to say, the same way as the safety of a building corresponds to the project to which it is subordinated, the success or failure in our smallest undertakings corresponds to our spiritual attitude. So the same way that a building for it to be safe, to be sturdy, not to collapse, depends on the project, depends on that design, depends on the basis. And then Aulus is telling us here that the same way our successes and our failures are dependent on our spiritual attitude or our feelings. Depending how well developed our feelings are is what will dictate whether or not we will succeed or fail in the smallest of undertakings. Because it is from our heart that we extract what we call it the raw material. If you think about a construction, or if you think about cooking food, if you will, the raw material or the ingredients, those will have a really important role in having a sturdy building or some good food. The same way that our heart is the raw material. It's those ingredients that we cultivate within ourselves that will make our actions good or not so good. He goes on to say that bringing a very interesting comparison and reflection about our feelings and about camera film. He says that our for those of you who remember camera films, if you're too young, you might not even know what those are. But he says that we know in photography that the cliche is the negative image obtained in the dark room from which we can extract innumerable positive evidence. And the cliche again is just you have the film, you have the negative, and those individual pictures is this cliche. And he compares this. He says the same way thought is the matrix that we compose in the intimacy of being, with which it is possible to create infinite manifestations of our individuality. So here he's starting to bring thought. He's trying to bring our intellect into all this to compare it to our feelings. So he says that the negative, those little images that you see on the film, those little images, that negative, that represents our thoughts. And from our thoughts is what we use to develop the pictures, to develop the photos. So it starts with our thoughts, and then it becomes our actions, how we portray ourselves to the world, our pictures, if you will. And then he goes on to say that the formation of these cliches or of this negative is the feeling that precedes any and every elaboration of mental order. So he's beautifully explaining here to us how the film is our feeling. The negative, those small little pictures, are thoughts. And then the developed photos are our actions. So no matter how good that negative is, no matter how good our thought is, if the film is not good, if the film is thick, or if the film is not transparent enough, the developed pictures will never be as good. He's telling us here that the film has a lot of influence on those negatives. In other words, our feelings, they have a lot of influence in our thoughts, and thus in our actions. So it's really interesting how he brings to us the importance of feelings, and how it can relate to our intellect. They're not separate, because our feelings can and will influence our thoughts, especially when we think about intellectualism, and we'll develop this a little bit further. But if I start to focus only on acquiring knowledge, and studying and acquiring knowledge, and forgetting about my feelings, and basically shutting them down, our feelings will still influence our thoughts. So if I'm still cultivating, if you will, hate or pride, no matter how much intellect I have, the use of that intellect will be influenced by my feelings. And that's why we see in our mediumistic department, we are finishing up a study on mediumship, and we're now reviewing a lot of cases from the books of André Luiz, talking about mediums that came to Earth with this objective to become mediums, and to, through their mediumship, develop themselves, improve themselves. And in these books from André Luiz, we have these mediums tell us that while they were on Earth, they focused so much on the intellect, and then they became so focused on the intellect, and they forgot about their feelings. They forgot about applying all that knowledge into themselves. That eventually, all those thoughts, all that intellect, they still failed in their journey, because again, their pride that they carried in their hearts, their hatred, or whatever ego that they still carried within their heart, was what was guiding all that intellect that they had. And eventually it didn't go as they wanted. So there's a lot to learn about feelings and thoughts, and part 3 and part 4 of this talk will get more into it. So Aldous keeps going and says, it is essential, therefore, to always and increasingly improve our acquisitions of fraternity, understanding, and empathy. So this is his invitation to tell us that when we start to develop our virtues, when we start to bring in feelings such as fraternity, understanding, and empathy, we're starting to develop our feelings. We're starting to enlighten our feelings. And as you remember Emmanuel saying, when we enlighten our feelings, that will create that enlightened reason that is so necessary for us to truly grasp and truly live the reasoned faith. And Arturo makes a reflection here, saying that I can dedicate my life to acquiring intellect, to acquire instruction, to acquire knowledge, to acquire eloquence in speaking and passing it to others, everything that I've learned. But if I don't bring it down to my essence, and the text from Emmanuel in the very beginning talked about bringing our thoughts into our essence. If we don't bring this knowledge, this understanding to my feelings, to my base, to my foundation, to the project that our feelings are, we will not be renewing ourselves, improving ourselves in the vertical. We'll only be touching the surface. So much so that Paul, he told us in a letter to the Corinthians, he said, he was giving us a beautiful message about love, and he said that even if we had the gift of prophecy, even if we knew all the mysteries, even if we knew all the science, even if we had all the faith, even if we knew everything about God, if we didn't have love, we wouldn't be anything. So Paul was telling us, even if we have all the intellect in this world, if we don't have love, if we don't cultivate our feelings, we're nothing. This brings us the idea that the attributes of our spirit are three of them: the thought, the feeling, and the will. So these are the three attributes of every spirit. So it is important to connect this with what Paul is telling us about feelings. So we can improve our thought, we can improve our intellect as much as we can. But if we're not improving our feelings, we won't be able to improve ourselves as a wholesome spirit. And then Aldous keeps going, and he says, the star is known for the light it gives off. The presence of the flower is denounced by its characteristics, by its scent, by its perfume. The creature is identified by the radiation it projects. Remembering a saying by Paul when he said, the true Christian is the good perfume of Christ. It is good for us to understand that we are producing something every single second, every single time. It's not the book that I'm writing, it's not the talk that I'm doing. Simply the fact of thinking and feeling, I'm already irradiating my scent, my perfume, out to the world, to my environment, to the people around me. And that reaches others. So just the fact that we're thinking, just the fact that we're feeling, we're already expressing ourselves to the world. We're already giving something. Emmanuel in the book Thought and Life, in chapter 9, he tells us that we exteriorize. So we bring it outside, our mental energy, based on our feelings, based on our thoughts. And those, they do affect others. And this is something that we cannot go away from. We can't just say, no, I don't want my feelings to irradiate this. It will, whether or not we want it. So it's not a matter of whether or not I want my thoughts and my feelings to irradiate out, but it's a matter of how can I change? How can I improve my feelings and my thoughts so what I irradiate is something positive, is something good, is something loving. So it's not preventing me from irradiating hate or irradiating pride, irradiating jealousy, but it's how can I transform? How can I develop? How can I improve those feelings so then I start to irradiate love and kindness? And that's why Aldous said the creature is identified by the radiation it projects. And we can see this a lot of times when people are talking, if we're watching a talk, a lot of times we might say, well, I can hear what he's saying, but I don't feel it. I don't think he's being honest. I don't think he's being genuine. Right? And that's usually because what the person is saying is not aligned with their feelings. They're still shutting their feelings down and just projecting the intellect. But we can feel what their own feelings is projecting. On the same token, when you have that person that gives us a talk that touches our hearts, it's because they're in line with their feelings and they're bringing the feelings out to the world with the words. And then he goes on to say that with sip ideas, assimilate ideas and express ideas every single day. So we sip ideas, we assimilate ideas and express ideas every single day. So every single day, not only are we creating our own ideas, formulating our own ideas, but we're also being influenced by the feelings and thoughts of others. So whoever is around us are being influenced by them, by their scent, if you will. And it's interesting, on the book Thought and Life, again, Emmanuel brings us on chapter 8, entitled Association. He tells us that when we're reading something, we are connecting ourselves to the author, to what the author was feeling when he wrote that. And this is just it's a beautiful idea that Emmanuel brings to us, because it means that when I'm reading a text from Emmanuel, I'm connecting with his feelings when he was writing those. When I'm reading a book from André Luiz, reading a book from Kardec, from Leon Denis, from Joanna de Angelis, if I really calm myself down, if I'm really in touch with my feelings, I can connect with them and connect with that feeling of love, of kindness that they were feeling while writing those words. And then he goes on to say that it is imperative, therefore, in our exchange with each other, to observe our sentimental states on the basis of our reflections and our victory or of our defeat in the field of ordinary struggle. So again, the invitation to reflect about how we're feeling, reflect about how we're thinking and what we're thinking, because that will for sure impact others. That will for sure, others will for sure feel that. They might not feel it consciously, but unconsciously they are feeling it. And a further reflection here is when I'm feeling something that's not so good, again, I can't stop my hatred from irradiating out, but I can start to work on transforming that hate into something else. So the invitation here is not to shut down our feelings, but rather develop them, improve them, enlighten them. And he keeps going and says, with this unpotential conceptualization, let us evoke nature to symbolize some of our feelings and to clarify as much as possible the lesson that experience offers us. So, Aldous here is inviting us to do an exercise. So if you've fallen asleep or if you've drifted off to something else, I'd like to invite you back because we will be doing an exercise, a thought exercise and a feeling exercise that Aldous is suggesting that we do, so we can understand a little bit more of how powerful our feelings are and our thoughts irradiate things out. If you remember Emmanuel, in the very first slide that we had here, he said, our feelings are a sanctuary, and that becomes a beacon to whatever we're carrying inside, right? If we're carrying love, we'll be irradiating love. If we're carrying hatred, we'll be irradiating hatred. So let us work through this little exercise here, and we'll do our best to do this online. So I'd like to invite you to picture something. For example, Aldous, he keeps going on his text and he says, hate is comparable to the hyena, spreading terror and death. So let's picture ourselves in a forest by ourselves. And we're walking, and then we see a hyena. We might be instantly taken over by terror, by fear. And Aldous is telling us that that feeling of terror, that feeling of fear, is exactly what we are irradiating out when we're cultivating hate within our hearts. So we're using nature here to paint us a picture of what we are, the perfume or the scent that our feelings are bringing to the world. The second one is envy. He says that envy is similar to the snake that crawls, emitting rays of poisonous magnetism. So again, if you picture yourself in a forest, right, with a snake that's just crawling and emitting rays of poisonous magnetism, how does that make us feel? That feeling that we're feeling right now is what we irradiate when we're feeling envy. He goes on to say that jealousy looks like a hungry wolf, spreading distress and distrust. So again, let's picture ourselves in a forest or in any other setting that we're alone, and we see ourselves in front of a wolf. A hungry wolf will immediately likely feel distress and distrust. We don't trust that animal, that they won't come and chase us. So that feeling of distress and distrust is exactly what we're emanating, irradiating out when we're cultivating jealousy within our hearts. And lastly, he says the aggressiveness is similar to the hedgehog, throwing spikes towards those who breathe its presence. So again, just think about a hedgehog and the aggressiveness that we bring to people. And it doesn't have to be physical aggressiveness, because physical aggressiveness, the person can literally feel that. But we're talking about verbal aggressiveness. We're also talking about mental aggressiveness and feeling aggressiveness towards somebody else is the same as a hedgehog throwing spikes. So whenever I'm aggressive to somebody, it's like my heart is spitting out spikes to somebody else's heart. So again, this exercise is just to illustrate how powerful our feelings are and what we would be bringing out to the world when we cultivate something like that. Sunny, I'd like to say something.
Hi, Victor. Yes, thank you. I'd just like to collaborate with your talk. Just saying that imagine we are doing this exercise and not only thinking about mainly what we are doing with ourselves, what we are creating in ourselves, diseases that we are treating. This energy is so powerful that comes, that really impacts ourselves, not only.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much, Sania. I forgot to mention that. Thank you. That's really important. All the hate, the envy, the jealousy, the aggressiveness that we're cultivating within ourselves, the first one affected is us. That poison that we're keeping within here is slowly seeping through ourselves. So the fact that we irradiate it out is because we're cultivating that in, and it is truly very detrimental to ourselves. And as Sania said, we can the word is to somatize, which means to bring this feeling into something more physical, like an illness or like a disease. So now that we did this exercise with things that are not so good, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to go to the other end of the spectrum and talk about things that fill our hearts. So this is a good exercise. Aldous tells us that love is comparable to the sun that warms and illuminates. So if you live in Canada, you can picture yourself outside. Right now, actually, it's a beautiful day out. But it's still winter time, so it's a little cold. So you can walk into a field, and all you'd see right now is white. That beautiful white snow, that chilly wind. But then you look above and you can see the sun. The sun's shining. And the sun is shining exactly onto your body. And you can feel that sun warming your body, illuminating everything around you. You can see it's almost like God is hugging you because you're feeling that warmth. You're feeling, the word in Portuguese is aquele acalento, that welcoming, that love that you can feel from that warmth from the sun. So that is exactly what people feel when we're feeling love. So when we're cultivating love within our hearts, we're portraying to the world this warmth, this illumination. And Arthur brings a really good point. He says, let's picture, or that's what people would say when they were around Chico Xavier. People would say that they would feel love, that they would feel good just by being next to him. That's because his love was so developed that he was able to emanate this light, this love. It's like there's a sun shining from their hearts. And we can go even further and think about Christ. Like Christ that had his love fully developed. You can think about the magnetism that he would bring. And so much so that in that passage with Publius Lentulus, when he faced Jesus, he couldn't say anything. He immediately knelt down and started crying because he was so touched by the love that Jesus had just by its presence. You can think about Paul of Tarsus in the road to Damascus when he saw Christ and he knelt down and again started crying because he was overwhelmed by this love that Jesus portrayed just by his presence. And the next one that Aldous brings us is understanding. He says that understanding copies the friendly source. And to illustrate this, you can think about you walking on a farm or walking at a park, and you start to hear some water running down, and you walk there, and you sit by the water, and it's a spring. It's in Portuguese, uma nascente de água. So you can feel that spring, that water just coming through, that crisp, that pure water, and you can just feel calm. You can feel, very calm, very in touch and connected with nature. That's what understanding brings. So when we're practicing understanding towards our friends, towards others, and towards ourselves, we're bringing that feeling of welcoming, of calmness and connectedness with them. The third one is fraternal tolerance is like a tree that always serves and helps. So just picture again ourselves walking through a forest and are really hungry, and then you see this tree, whatever you like. If you see a mango tree or an orange tree or whatever fruit you like, you go to that tree and you grab that fruit, and that fruit provides you with what you need at that moment. You can also picture a hot day outside. The sun is shining and it's really hot, and the tree is what is going to provide you with that shade. And you can sit by the tree and just calm yourself down. So this is the fraternal tolerance. So when we are fraternal, when we're tolerant to one another, that's the feeling that we are bringing to the world. And the last one is kindness, and it's a beautiful representation of what kindness is by Aldous. He says that kindness is the sister of constructive music, unfolding consolations and mitigating misfortune. So now I invite you to think about that song that you love, that favorite song. And kindness is like the lyrics of those songs, of that song. The lyrics that speak to you, the lyrics that can express exactly what you're feeling at that moment. It's that those lyrics that they connect with you so well that you feel consoled. And then at the same time, you bring the melody of the music, you bring the harmonics of that music, and you can see how you can feel a lot of harmony around that song. Whatever anxiety you're feeling, it kind of dissolves away. So that melody kind of harmonizes your heart. So this is exactly what kindness brings to everybody around us and to ourselves. Kindness brings the consolation and also brings this harmony around us and within us. So next time we're feeling kindness within our hearts, we can picture this feeling of consolation being put out there to others, and this harmony that the kindness is instilling in the environment. And then he goes on to say that the high feelings generates the high thought, and the high thought guarantees the elevation of existence. So again, we can think that the high feeling generates the high thought, and the high thought guarantees the elevation of existence. So it starts with developing our feelings, then developing our thoughts, and that will guarantee our elevation in our existence. In the book, Words of Eternal Life, Emmanuel brings us the idea that for us to renew ourselves, we first have to learn how to feel with Christ. So then we can observe with Christ, we can see with Christ, we can hear with Christ, and we can act like Christ. But the first one is to feel with Christ. And the reflection that Artur brings here that's amazing is with this invitation to first feel with Christ. Let's picture ourselves in a situation where somebody does something wrong. And a lot of times our immediate thought is to think and to judge that person, that they did something wrong. So let us bring this invitation from Emmanuel to feel with Christ first. So now when I see somebody doing something wrong, I allow myself to feel first. Feel with my heart. So I allow myself to feel compassion towards that person because they did something wrong. And then, after I'm feeling that compassion, then I can activate my thoughts and start thinking about what they did. But it won't come as a judgment. It will come as a thought that will help that person out, that it will help console, and that it will help that person move forward. The same thing, we can do a thought exercise as well. If somebody comes to me and offends me, a lot of times the immediate thing that I do is to fight back. That person hurt me. How can I hurt them back right away? So again, if we take this invitation from Emmanuel to feel with Christ first, when we're offended by somebody, if we can feel how, what's the word? How much that person that's offending me is suffering right now. They're suffering so much that it's causing them to offend me. If we can reach that, we can start to develop empathy within our hearts. And when we start to develop empathy within our hearts, our thought will be guided not to fight back, but to love. And so that's the invitation from Emmanuel, to feel with Christ first, and then to lead ourselves into thought. So Aldous keeps going and says, we feel good to reflect well, ensuring the good on the road that we're invited to take. Then he goes on to say, indeed, thought is the cause of action, but feeling is the vibrating mold which thought and cause are formed. So thought is what makes things happen, if you will. Thought is what precedes our actions. But then he says that the mold of our thought is our feelings. So again, if our feelings are not really good, even though we might have this amazing intellect, the intellect will likely be shaped, molded, or guided in the wrong direction. He says that feeling, we model the idea, and then thinking, we create destiny. Isn't that beautiful? Feeling models the idea, and then thinking, we create destiny. So this is really important for us because it shows us that we're not saying that feeling is more important than our thoughts. We're saying they're equal. They both play a part. They're both equally important. So for us, not to be dismissive to our feelings, to shut them down, because they're just as important as our thought. Let us attend to mental hygiene. However, let us not forget that the house, no matter how bright and clean it is, it will not live happily without food. And goodness is the bread of our souls. He ends with saying, for this reason, the Divine Master recommends us. It is imperishable in this lesson that we love one another as he had loved us. Aulus. So this is the entire text that Aulus brought to us. And hopefully we can take this lesson from Christ to love one another as he has loved us, realizing that feeling is truly important for us to develop, for us to improve ourselves and our society. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for participating. Thank you to Gislaine, Sonia, Carol, for being here with us. Before I do my final prayer, I just wanted to remind everybody that tomorrow, on Monday, we won't be having our public meeting, but instead we will have our study on the gospel. And we'll send more information on our WhatsApp group tomorrow. So if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to end with a prayer. So I'll invite you to, before closing your eyes, just looking at those pictures. looking at Christ hugging us, and then looking a small little boy and a small little girl hugging themselves as well. And in those two pictures, I invite you now to close your eyes and feel that love. Feel that kindness. Feel that peace that feelings can bring to us. Dear Lord, we ask you to help us feel with Christ, to help us feel with Christ, and not to be ashamed of our feelings, but recognize them, love them. Bring to our feelings the importance they so deserve, and to enlighten our feelings by developing our virtues, so that we can become a more wholesome spirit, with feelings and thoughts driving me to enlightened actions, to loving actions, to kindness. Thank you, Lord, again for being with us here today. And we ask you again that we can become the beacons of light, the beacons of love, the beacons of peace that you bestow upon us every single second of every single day. So be it. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm really happy to share feelings with you, and I hope to see you tomorrow at our study of the gospel. So thank you, and have a great Sunday.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Victor.
you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.